In the last video, we talked about setting up a local server on a machine. So for the rest of this course, I'll be running off of one of those local machines we set up. And just to give a quick overview and some updates on a few things, if I go back to my W7 Tech server here, you'll notice I am running WAMP and it is public or put online. Now because it is a Windows machine, I did have to install an Ftp server. If you're installing XAMPP on a Mac, it comes built in with an Ftp server. So all I did was I Google searched FileZilla server, and then you can download it from right there, from filezilla-project.org. Once it's downloaded, just double click on the icon and create a user. In this case, I created my name with my first initial. I created a password, made sure the account was enabled. And then under the folder, I had to map a folder. So on my Windows machine, it's mapped to C:\wamp/www. And then I gave it permissions on that machine. If you don't make sure it has write and read permissions and create and delete directories, then you'll be limited on what you can do. Now keep in mind, I'm doing this because I'm running my client on another machine. If you're running it locally, on the same machine as you're running Dreamweaver on, then you don't have to set up an FTP client. And just a quick overview on how I connected to that client. I just went to Manage Sites. I created a new directory, but in this case I'm going to edit it so you can see what I've done. Here's where the files will be stored locally. I click on Server. The FTP address is just W7Tech. That's the name of my computer. You can also use the IP address of your computer there. The username I created on FileZilla client or server, and then the password I used on that. Just to make sure it works, you can click on test, and it works successfully. And then here's the web URL to actually get to that website, which we can see right here. So let me close out of all this. And now I'm connected remotely. Again, if you're not using an FTP client on a remote server, then you can just connect with local view and just make sure that your settings are mapped to the htdocs directory or the www directory, depending on what version of server you're running. Now these items were installed by default from WAMP, and I'm just going to remove those. The first thing we're going to do is create a new file. You'll notice it creates untitled.html. We want to erase this whole name, including the extension, and call it index.php. Index.php and index.html files are the primary and home page of every website. I'm going to go ahead and double click on that file. It asks me if I want to get dependent files. In this case, I don't have any dependent files, so I don't have to get them. So I'm going to go ahead and move this out of the way so the coding can be seen a little bit bigger. And this is the pre-generated HTML code that Dreamweaver makes for you. We're going to rename the title of the document to test, or actually we'll name it to PHP 101. And everything else can remain the same. The body of the website is where everything is actually seen on the website. The heading of the website is where anything that's referenced is going to be. So meta tags, CSS, cascading style sheets, JavaScript, all that's going to go up here. The HTML tags encapsulate everything, and the doc type simply says what kind of document this is. Most of that we're not going to get into. The first thing we're going to do is open PHP Tags. You're going to use a less than symbol with a question mark, and then type PHP. I'm going to go ahead and press enter 3 times, and then close the tag with a question mark and a greater than symbol. You always want to make sure to close your tags as soon as you open them. This makes sure that you don't forget to close a tag later at a later time. Now inside of our PHP group here, we're going to go ahead and create a comment. Comments allow you or another developer to notate a section of code. This way, when you go back and look at a later time, you know what that code is doing or what your thinking process was at that time. To do a single line comment, you're going to do 2 forward slashes. To do a large comment, you're going to do a forward slash with a star or asterisk, and then press enter a couple times, then do an asterisk and a slash. Now anything inside this block will be used as a comment. Now that we have commenting down, let's look at a few other commands that we can do in PHP. One of which is echo. The echo command will output something onto the user's screen. All PHP is rendered server-side, which means that the user sees none of this code. They may see the HTML code, but the PHP code is hidden. So we're going to echo out to the screen, "Hello, this is a test." I'm going to close my quotes. Kind of like tags, you have to open it, then you have to close it. And with all PHP tags, you have to end them in a semicolon. Now there are some PHP elements like loops and if statements that we will not end in a semicolon, but we'll get into that later. I'm going to go ahead and save this, which will save it locally with Command S or Control S if you're on a Windows machine. And then I'm going to go ahead and upload it to the server with Command Shift U or Control Shift U if you're on a Windows machine. And I'm going to put dependent files, no. Okay, so I'm going to go to my http://w7-tech. So there's our "Hello, this is a test." Let's check out the source code. So here you can see all our doc type information, title, heading, body, but you don't see any of the PHP, only what was outputted or echoed to the user. So let's adjust this a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and do another line and do echo, and this time I'm going to use single quotes. Notice this, the type you start with has to be the type you finish with. Let's go ahead and save that. And we will refresh the page here. And you'll see they came together. So even though I have them on different lines here, they're as one line here. So if you want to render a different line, you're going to have to throw in some HTML as well. So inside my quotes, I'm just going to put an HTML break. And now you can see the break. Alternately, I could take out the break and just make sure there's a space. And now I'll put that space right there. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this line. And let's say I need to join two text fields together. You join with a period in PHP. So I'm going to put a period right after the quote, and I'm going to open another quote. And put "this is the second part" here. Notice these are two text elements separated by a period. For the remainder of this course, when I refer to straight text, I'm going to call it a string. So a string is a data type, which we'll get into data types later, but data type of string is straight text or clear text. For this course, all user-defined functions, such as echo, will be in lowercase. However, this is not required by PHP. For instance, I could do capital E, C, capital H, O, and let's go ahead and put that on a new line. And see, that functions as well. But we're not going to use that syntax. It'll all be lowercase. Now, when we get into variables later, variables are case sensitive. So that's the difference between user-defined functions and variables. PHP can be injected into any part of the HTML document, and PHP does not have to have HTML. So for instance, with form processing, which we'll look at later, the form processor won't have any HTML in it. It'll just have PHP. But I could also come up here where I have PHP 101. And inject some PHP right there. So now I've changed PHP 101 to the PHP 102, which I'm echoing through our code here. Let me save that. And now you can see PHP 101 right here, but when I refresh, it's now PHP 102. Now let's move on to variables.